shift left. I'm bringing this up because of something I saw. I'll show you about it as we get into this. But shift left became an immediate awareness item for me this week. And so I wanted to bring it to you guys because it may be a concept that some of you know, but I'm pretty sure all of you don't know. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's called shift left. And the more you know about it, the better you're going to be, because like I point out, the goal of this mentorship program is to get into your boss's head so that you understand what your managers, what your CISO, what your CEO is thinking, so that you can relate to them properly and communicate with them, not just so you can play around with tools and techniques. I want you to be beyond that already the first time you go speak to somebody about a new job. So shift left, it's a phrase many of you may not have heard. So for those of you that haven't heard about shift left before, well, let me ask everybody here. When I say shift left, what do you think of? And mentors, just hold back for a minute. From the mentees, when I say shift left, what do you think? Okay, well, that's good. So I'm teaching you something that you don't have knowledge of. So let's take a look at this in reference to coding, in reference to performing support services, and in reference to security. It's really a valuable concept to have in your mind. If you're not doing shift left automatically, you need to start. So in its simplest form, shift left means to move something earlier. Sounds simple, but I'll show you how it applies. Now, of course, let's ask the really interesting question. Why do we say shift left? Why don't we say shift right or up or down? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Why is it called shift left? Moving something earlier.
I don't know, left seems kind of against the norm.
What do you mean, Brianna?
Well, I don't really know like what path they're going down right now, like, technically, but usually, individuals are right-handed, not left-handed. So it kind of like, changing your way of thinking, not going slow, but against the norm.
Okay. All right. I understand that. I'm left-handed, but I understand what you're saying. All right. Right-handed people, shift left means to do something different, something contrary to what you may be used to. I think that's a good concept. Anyone else? Okay, well, I'll give you my thought on this, and Gulru, you may have an interesting perspective, because my thought is many of us, most of us, are taught to write from left to right on a piece of paper. We start at the left, we finish at the right. Gulru, you may have learned to write differently. Is that correct?
I mean, yeah, from completely different alphabet, yes.
Mm-hmm. So just so everybody understands, Gulru writes, you know how to write like in Arabic from right to left, right? Correct? Okay. So for most of us, we think of right as being later and left as being earlier. If you look at process diagrams, even if you go out into like your Microsoft PowerPoint and say, show me a process diagram, it's going to start from the left and continue to the right. It's just a natural way of looking at things because that's how our brain thinks. I start my sentence here and I keep moving over to here. So I start left, finish right. So from software design in the software development lifecycle, it includes the concept of shift left means move your testing, your quality assurance, and your security scans earlier in software development lifecycle. The original software development, if any of you have done it before, is basically, define your requirements, choose your tool, write your code, compile your code, then test it, and that's where security begins. Well, the point of shift left is, and I'll show you an example here, shift left basically means if you can do it, move your security testing as early as possible in your software development lifecycle. For example, if you're using libraries that you downloaded off GitHub or something, how do you know that those libraries are pristine and don't insert unwanted features? Well, you learn that by testing the library even before you integrate it, before you start using it. So shift left testing means think of security literally as you begin thinking of your coding projects. And in the software development lifecycle, shift left is a concept that, and I'll give you my example, in my contract, the last contract that I managed, which was $114 million or something, it literally said in the contract, you must show us how you are going to perform shift left methodology in your support services. Tell us how you're going to improve by demonstrating your shift left thoughts. And this was literally in the proposal. So you have to realize that shift left could very well be something that is expected when you show up at your next job. So this is shift left from the software development lifecycle perspective. And again, analyze, design, develop. Wait a minute, let's go back to, as we're analyzing and designing, making sure that the stuff we're using, the code, let's say we're using C# instead of C++. Well, C# contains inherent vulnerabilities that are very difficult to code out. So just because you're good at C#, you may require yourself to use a development language that you're not that familiar with, because the stuff you are familiar with contains vulnerabilities. So that's a shift left viewpoint. Okay, so in the software development lifecycle, shifting left means incorporate your security, your ease of use, all of the things that you want to test in the testing phase as early as possible in your software development lifecycle. Okay, and the point of it is it provides for faster feedback. Why? Because you've already considered some of those things that you would have had to test for later on in the cycle. It reduces your costs, again, because usually if you do a development and then test it and it doesn't work, you have to go back in your loop and develop again. So if you've already considered what your outcome should be and how it should be arranged, whether it should immediately have good security practices in it, if you design it at the beginning, you have fewer redo loops. It's literally faster to code using a shift left methodology, and it costs less and improves software quality. Stuff doesn't make it out to the market as frequently that a customer then says, oh, by the way, I found a vulnerability in your code. Nerman.
Oh, yeah, I just want to add something regarding this. Yeah, I mean, that's like when we're talking about cybersecurity, that's secure by design. So basically, from early beginning. So all those, let's say, software developers, they have to have kind of keep in mind security on every development stage. So implement security features. But most companies nowadays, they're trying to implement that strategy called security by design, because before nobody was practicing that, and even now. And the reason for that, it's money, bottom line. So everyone wants to make a good product. Everyone wants to push the product as soon as possible on market and start making money. And those software developers, they care to make product to work. As long as it's done and it's working and it's making money, that's all, nothing else. And that's why nowadays we have bug bounty program. We have all those companies like kind of like participating like in all those kind of like penetration testing, web application testing programs, and then letting ethical hackers to try to find some vulnerabilities and you know, kind of help them like to fix the software, to patch the vulnerability. So that's the biggest reason. Like it's nobody is trying to do anything about security. Just make product and make it work and make money.
Yep.
So yeah,
you're exactly right, Ermin. The Secure by Design pledge was put together by CISA because they wanted to find some sort of value that they could put forward to software developers and maybe to the government and purchasers of the software to say, do you adhere to the Secure by Design pledge? And so, CISA actually designed the Secure by Design process because of coders, just like you said, all they're interested in is money. If it works, we're happy. So very good. I appreciate that. So in support services, let's shift gears a little bit. Now we're talking about literally IT support, like help desk or system administration or whatever. And the point is, shift left means to move the resolution action as early as possible after initial contact. If anybody has ever done Tier 1 service desk, shift left basically means, and I can share it in the next slide, but it basically means the higher tiers move as much of their processes down to the first tier so that the first tier can do it and it doesn't require escalation, because escalation costs money. You're now talking, if you go to service desk and you get somebody on the phone and they can't do something simply because they don't have the proper permissions or training or whatever, and it must go to Tier 2, you've now included 2 people, and Tier 2 is generally higher paid, so the cost goes up, and then it goes to Tier 3, and the cost goes up again. You've now included 3 people in this resolution action. Tier 1 took the call, Tier 2 tried it out, was unable to do it, so it ended up going to Tier 3 usually because of specialized permissions. So if you could move those permissions down to Tier 1, then the customers would be happier because they'd get back to work sooner, if you think about it. Also, and I'll demonstrate this in the next slide, prior to Tier 1, there is what's called Tier 0. Does anybody have an idea of what Tier 0 or level 0 is in the support process? Level 0. Anyone?
Is it a customer?
Close. You're really close, Kate. Tier 0 or level 0 is known as self-service. In other words, if I get onto a website and I can change my password through the intranet, or if I can update my contact information, or if I can request a new wireless hotspot or whatever, without even involving someone else in the process, that's called tier 0. But the moment you go to a human being, that's called tier 1 or higher. So tier 0 is inherently cheaper than any of the other support tiers. If you can make it self-service, you really should do so. Any questions before I go to the next slide? Because in the next slide, I give costs. And this is bona fide based on research. Okay? Typical tier 0 self-help is around $2 per incident. Tier 1, $22. Tier 2, $69. Tier 3, $104. Tier 4, or whatever it's called, if it goes to a field support where somebody literally has to come to your desk and assist you, if you're like out in the field somewhere, that's $221. And if it's so complex that they have to call the vendor in, like Microsoft, and say, hey, this guy's Windows just don't seem to work. He just can't get his security patches applied. And you escalate it to Microsoft, look at the cost. $5.99 for vendor support. By the way, these are proven figures. These are average figures in the industry. $5.99 for vendor support compared to, go all the way back down to self-help, $2. And here's something a lot of people don't think about. If you notice, there's a tier -1. -1 means you prevent the situation from occurring in the first place. Prevention is the cheapest form of support. You design it well, you implement it properly, and you make sure that the number of incidents that the customers will experience will be the absolute minimum. And that's how you save money. That's how you economize your support. And oh, by the way, customer satisfaction goes from, I'm not very satisfied, even though we're paying $5.99 to go to Microsoft, I don't feel special because this has delayed my work for 2 or 3 or 4 days. I would much prefer to be able to do my work and not be disturbed by my IT services at all. So customer satisfaction is highest depending on the lowest number of tiers for your support. So shift left means if it's tier 2, move it to tier 1. If it's tier 1, move it to self-service. If it's something that is routinely done and experienced by the customers, find a way that they don't experience it at all. That's called tier -1, and it's known as prevention. Shift left. Saves money, saves time, increases customer satisfaction. So from support services, move things earlier in the support process. Enable your frontline teams to have as much in the way of training and tools and controls. You may be able to give them just the permissions they need to do this particular task and not give them full system admin roles. You can do that. You can segment responsibility and permissions based on the specific needs that the customers are going to have. And again, like I pointed out, prevention is the cheapest and most secure because there will be no incidents. All right? So the shift left culture is something that a lot of people don't think about. I had to teach my teams about shift left. And for some of them, they're like, well, yeah, duh, but you have to put that in someone's minds so that they start thinking about it in what they're doing. Otherwise, it's like, I get a ticket, I work the ticket. I get a ticket, I call the customer, I work the ticket, and I'm happy, and the customer's happy. Well, how about if we get it to where the customer doesn't have to call you? Wouldn't that be better? As far as the customer is concerned, the answer is always yes. Unless they really just want to talk to you. You're a nice person on the phone. I've seen that happen too. They're like, oh, is Tom around? Because I really like talking to him. No, I'm sorry, Tom's busy. I'm going to put you over with Tina or whatever, you know. So personalities shouldn't be involved in your support services. The other advantage of a shift left culture is you're crossing tiers, and tiers are usually different teams. So what I tried to do is I tried to tell tier 3 that they need to have a feeling of responsibility for the success of the lower tiers. And they're like, well, why? I'm like, I want them to do it so you don't get it. You can do the more complex stuff, absolutely. But the real simple stuff, teach them how to do it so it never gets to you. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So just remind everybody, shift left means everybody gets involved because you start thinking of those lower tiers and trying to come up with ways to where they can do the stuff that gets escalated to the higher tiers simply because that's the way it's always been done. So shift left, faster, less expensive, higher customer satisfaction, and greater security. So here's why I brought this up. I think I mentioned to everybody, I'm starting my CYSA Plus study, and on one of the practice questions, they talked about the SDLC process. And they said the analyst is finding the same vulnerabilities. What would you recommend? And the answer, it's sort of hard to see with all of his little red marks that he was doing as he was describing this, but the answer was C, application security scanning as part of the pipeline for CI/CD. We have never talked CI/CD before. It's continuous integration, continuous development or deployment. It depends on which one you're talking about. But if you notice, it says this approach aligns with the principle of shift left security, which advocates for incorporating security testing throughout the development lifecycle. So this is a practice exam question for the CISA Plus that I said, well, I need to teach everybody about this. So this is my last slide. I just wanted everybody to understand the value of that shift left methodology and to have it in your head that everybody should try and figure out ways to where the simple stuff that shouldn't come to me anyway, if I can push it to an earlier period, earlier period in the software development lifecycle, then I don't have to do it later. If I can push it to an earlier period in my security plans and programs, then I don't have to test it later, or my tests are going to be guaranteed to pass. And in the support processes, earlier means better, means faster, means more economical, means higher customer satisfaction, and usually means better security. So shift left is extremely valuable. Your managers are thinking about it. Ultimately, that's what you want to do. You want to be thinking things and coming up with discussions and saying, well, you know, instead of me doing this, how about if I find a way for the previous guys to do it? Oh, sure. Yeah, what's your manager going to say? Well, no, that's your job. No. Shift left. Move it to where it's less costly, faster accomplished, less experienced levels are required to do it, and in the end, the customers have higher satisfaction. Any questions? Any comments about shift left? It's again, for many people, it seems obvious, but it is something that you should intentionally incorporate into your processes. Kate.
I didn't get how we combine it with the zero trust. I thought that tires especially needed for the permissions, and that's how they are divided. So, yeah.
Zero trust? I didn't talk about zero trust.
Yeah, but I mean just the shift left, how do we combine it with the zero trust? If we are given more, I don't know, tasks or permissions to the lower level, how it works.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Zero trust is based on, it starts with the principle of least privilege. Okay, PLP, you should be able to look that up in your exam questions and stuff. The principle of least privilege means that only the minimum amount of permissions necessary or access necessary is given, and it's based on role, and it's based on purpose, and it's based on need. The principle of zero trust means nobody is assigned a default. No, there are no defaults. You start with zero permissions and you say, what are my roles? What are my responsibilities? What are the tools needed? What are the activities needed? And then you plug in the minimum permissions necessary. I'll give you an example. Back in the day, when I was doing IT support in the Pentagon, there was a government manager that said, I'm given domain admin rights. And the contractors who were working for him said, why? He said, because I'm the government manager and I need to see what you're doing. And the problem you run into is that, let's say I'm the contractor and I've got this team of highly skilled technicians, and then I've got this person from somewhere else that has permissions over everyone. If this person messes up, it affects us. So the principle of least privilege says that as a manager, you don't necessarily have to have all of the permissions that the people performing under you have. And oh, by the way, this was a manager from the people that hired you wanted to have the same permissions that your people who are doing the work have. And that does not go along with zero trust, nor does it go along with the principle of least privilege. That person's role was not to change permissions or to create new accounts or whatever. That's what he was hiring us to do. But he demanded domain admin, and nowadays it's called schema admin, where you can literally turn off Active Directory. Let's just make sure that the people who are responsible for that are the only ones that can do it. So principle of least privilege is how zero trust comes in, and principle of least privilege starts at the very beginning. You design it in, like Nerman mentioned, secure by design. All of these fit together. Shift left, from a zero trust standpoint, shift left is where everything starts anyway. You don't start with an assumption that certain people have certain permissions. Does that make sense, Kate?
Yep. And the following question, do you consider that the shifting left, we are increasing the permissions for the tires, but decreasing our costs? So it's kind of slightly increase the risks, but decrease the cost? Or
yeah, I understand what you're saying about decreased or increased risk, the possibility of increased risk. But that's where you have to make sure that as you are doing that shift left process, you have to examine those risks and say, have I taken those risks into account? For example, have I written extremely precise procedures that, for me, they're I know it naturally. I just, click, 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 and away I go. But what about the guy that I'm teaching to do this? This person needs to say, number 1, do this. Number 2, do this. Number 3, type this, etc. And so things that are naturally taken for granted at the higher support tiers have to be specified on the earlier tiers, and then test that to examine your risk. But you are correct. The lower tiers usually have lower expertise levels, and therefore they have to have good, a word that they use these days are guardrails, so that they can't get themselves in trouble. Minimum permissions, well documented, automate as much as you can. Your goal is to get down to tier 0 where the customers don't even have to talk to one of us. So, good point, Kate. Anyone else? Any other questions? Comments, observations? Was this helpful? Y'all are noisy today.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it was really helpful, of course.
Okay.
Very good.
So, again, the reason I brought it up is it was in this exam. And so this is something that if you don't know it now, it would be helpful for you to know in the future. And shift left is a management term. So again, the point of CyberSecurity Sensei is to allow you to be thinking like your CISO. All right? So that's why we're doing it. All right, everybody. Hope y'all have a wonderful Saturday. I'm off to a fashion show. I think you can tell I dressed up for this gig. But I'm off to a fashion show. So you all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk later. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Scott.
Bye-bye.